Trina Hurd. I am one of three preschool specialists at the Utah State Board of Education. And with me tonight is Dallas Brooks. She is the assessment specialist for ELA and also for preschool. And we're going to be covering some general content together. And then we are going to leave time at the end for questions, a little bit of question answer. I was going to say discussion, probably not enough time for that, but some question answers. So let's get started. Just right out of the gate, so everybody knows, this is our lovely screenshot example. If you are looking at this screen here, down here at the bottom of your screen, there's all of your different menu options. And you'll see there's a Q&A, and then there's also a resources tab. The Q&A is where, as we are talking, if something comes up that you're thinking, I would like some more information about that, or I didn't understand that, please put it in the Q&A because Dallas and I will review that. And then at the end, those are the things that we'll pull from during our question and answer session. If you see a question in there that you're like, oh, I also want that question, you can like it or upvote it the same way you would like on Facebook. And so then questions that have a lot of upvotes will pop up for Dallas and me as upvoted, and then we'll know those are the ones to address first. The resources tab has PDF copies of the resources that we're going to be sharing with you, as well as a PDF that says general resources with multiple links into some of the other things that we're going to refer to. So if you're like, oh my gosh, I really want a printout of that thing that they were showing, check your resources tab. And in your follow-up email, you will also get a link to a OneDrive folder that has access to all of the things that we're going to cover tonight. So that is zoomed out. Let's zoom in a little bit and talk about what we're going to do tonight. So our agenda for tonight, we're going to start with a overview of the core standards. There are the Utah Core State Standards for Early Learning for ages 3 through 5. And those we sometimes refer to as our preschool standards. And then we have kindergarten standards, and those are in general aligned kindergarten through 12th. However, beginning with the English language arts standards and now moving forward, so when the math standards are approved this spring, you'll notice that all of the standards are P12. So as we are rewriting, revising, and getting approval on standards, we're making that alignment from age 3 all the way up through grade 12, so that you can draw a straight line from this skill in as a 3-year-old, goes to this skill, to this skill, to this skill, all the way to graduation. And hopefully that continuity will help us be able to provide the very best education we can for all the children that we are hoping to teach. So we're going to talk a little bit about the early learning standards tonight, specifically English language arts and math, alignment to the kindergarten standards. And then we'll go a little bit bigger and say, what does that look like preschool all the way through 2nd grade? We're going to cover some of the assessment tools, the PEEP, or the Preschool Entry, Exit, and Profile, that is made available to anyone who would like to use it. For kids, that is just for kids ages 4. The PEEP does not assess for kids ages 3 or age 3. And then we'll talk about how the PEEP lines up with kindergarten through 2nd grade. The tool that they use is called Acadians. So how can we look at the skills that are measured by each of these assessments? How can we line those skills up and get the best information we can about the learning that is taking place? And then we are also going to cover a little bit of what progress monitoring is. What does it look like? What can it look like? And give you some access to some tools that you can use for progress monitoring your students. And then finally, we'll go over a little bit about how do you communicate with families, the other adult caregivers in the lives of these children. How do you communicate with them how their child is doing on the assessment and how they can provide home support? All right, so that's big picture. Let's start with this word alignment. And what does alignment mean? This quote is a favorite one that I pulled from the NAEYC, which is the National Association for the Education of Young Children. They have their position statements on developmentally appropriate practice. And one of the things that they talk about is planning, implementing curriculum to achieve goals. So this quote here, talking about how it's our responsibility as educators to make sure that we're teaching before and in their skill, and then after, with that after in mind as well, so that we are not having gaps in understanding, but that we're supporting children from the knowledge they have to the knowledge they're gaining to the knowledge that comes next. So I love this image of alignment when I think about a child climbing a ladder. If you think about the rungs on that right-hand side ladder, how far apart they're spaced, with some pretty big spaces, and the child on the right can't reach those by herself. That is what standards are. They are those rungs on the ladder that are those set markers of growth. You know, at age 3, your child should be mastering this skill. At age 6, a student should be mastering this skill. What is the beauty of teaching and the power of a teacher is that ladder on the left. You know what skills are coming next, you know what skills came before, and you also know your students well enough that you know where you need to fill in the spaces in between. So another one of my favorite quotes is, programs don't teach, teachers do. You are the rungs in between that are giving the children the ability to get from one standard to the next. So as we're talking through standards today, and we're talking about benchmark assessments, know that in our minds, we are thinking standards, that ladder on the right is giving us some good metrics of where we've been, where we're going, and you, the teacher, are the ladder on the left. Okay, so standards. Standards are what we teach and why. When we think about early childhood, depending on the environment that you're in for preschool or early childhood education, if you're in more of a care setting, you're going to think about those developmental domains and the developmental milestones. A really easy resource is the CDC, and they have a milestones tracker. And milestones are those things that kids are going to naturally do as they age. And if they miss a milestone, then it's a red flag for like, something's off on that development, and how can I support that child? So we're going from there. A lot of us in early childhood are familiar with the Head Start early learning outcomes and their domains. That is a resource that is commonly familiar to us. So there I've outlined what theirs look like. And then on the right there, I've got our core state standards for early learning. And you can see I could draw a line from the CDC side of social emotional developmental domain over to one of the core standards for early learning. That like social emotional, I would draw this line right over to lifelong learning practices. These developmental domains are going to be a match for what is being taught when I'm teaching about lifelong learning. There's also some social emotional in the social studies standards. So if you are more familiar with one of these columns versus another, know that each of these is not dependent, but informed by the other one. So when we are writing early learning standards, we're looking at these other resources and using the information and the research that comes from other resources like this to inform what we're putting in the standards. Things like cognitive, that's going to show up in the math standards and also in the science standards. Yeah, so say you're like, well, I'm really most familiar with the CDC developmental domains and those milestones. Should I like ignore those and only work towards the state standards? Nope, both. And both are going to work together to be what's best for students. These are all linked, by the way, so when we send you a copy of these slides, you can click to get directly to these, but they're also in that reference document. All right, so hopefully you have seen the state standards. If you haven't, welcome. These are the state standards. This format right here, you can see there's a strand at the top. The strand is going to tell you what area of this particular content we're talking about. So strand 2 in English language arts is reading. And so this number right here, P3, that means preschool 3 or pre-K 3.R is for reading. So some of them might say P3W or P3, I'm trying to think what one of the math ones are, OA for algebraic thinking, operations and algebraic thinking. They're all coded that way, just so you know what that number is for. This is the overall idea. And this exact statement, students will learn to proficiently read and comprehend grade level literature. That's for all of the grades, preschool through 12th. This statement applies. But then we get into here, and this is where we detail out what that looks like exactly. So at pre-3, if we're talking about reading, standard 1, demonstrate mastery of age-appropriate concepts of print. And I really appreciate that our standards include the words age-appropriate concepts of print. We're not expecting a 3-year-old to sit down and open a book and read it the same way we expect an 8-year-old to. We're looking at what is appropriate for a 3-year-old. You'll notice a lot of our 3-year-old standards will say with prompting and support, because a 3-year-old might pick up a book and maybe they have it upside down. And so if I say to that 3-year-old, oh, is that the right way? And they can flip it, well, that's prompting. And now, yeah, they can meet that standard. Versus a 4-year-old, I'm going to expect them to hold up the book, look at it and be like, oh, this is upside down, and flip it themselves. And that's where that alignment comes in, where I can see age appropriate from 3 to 4, children are growing. We're going to look down here at this mastery of age appropriate phonological awareness skills. We're going to follow this standard right here. A, with prompting and support, explore rhyming words and alliteration. We're going to follow it all the way up through 2nd grade. So this is what it looks like at age 3. And then here at age 4, recognize rhyming words and alliteration. And then what comes next for our next age group? So we don't have a document that lines everything up for you. I'm very sorry. But we do have one that lines up ELA and math preschool through 2nd grade. So we've got to start, and we're working on other resources to get everything else lined up. But you can, using these documents we've created, take this early learning skill, start here at P3, R2. Here it is, P3, R2 at age 4. And now, on up.
Yes. So then, like Katrina was saying, you can really trace how these standards build upon themselves in complexity from year after year. So Katrina was pointing out that phonological awareness strand there where it starts with exploring rhymes in the early learning standard for 3-year-olds. And then it progresses all the way to manipulating sounds in 5 to 6 phoneme words by 2nd grade. So you can really just follow that band, see how it is getting more complex by grade level. And this vertical alignment really is what helps to ensure a smooth and logical bridge for students as they advance through the grade levels.
One of the things you'll see also on this vertical alignment is that some of these skills, like concepts of print, you notice says mastered in preschool, mastered in preschool. We're hoping that by kindergarten, holding a book and reading directionality has been mastered. However, if you are teaching a kindergarten student and you're like, what do you mean mastered in preschool? This child doesn't know how to do that. You can go back and know where that gap in understanding might be so that you can fill that in so they have that skill.
Yes, and vice versa. You can look ahead to the next grade level to see where students are going, what they're going to be doing in the next grade level, so you can prepare them to be ready for that next grade level as well. Right. Okay, so we've talked about the standards, which cover the what we teach and why. So we're going to kind of shift gears into assessments. And we are going to talk about the why, what, and how of assessments. This is how we find out what our students know and how we can best support their learning. So If you will go to the next slide for me, Katrina, thank you so much. So we all know that assessment sometimes can be a pretty loaded term, but it's really important to remember that assessment includes both formal and informal measures. The real goal, honestly, is to monitor a child's progress towards their goals, to see where they still have skill gaps that we can intervene on and fill those holes. That way students can be on grade level with their peers. We have to know where each child is with respect to those learning goals in order to be intentional about helping them progress. And that's where our assessments come into place. Next slide, please. So let's take a look at our preschool entry and exit profile, or the PEEP. It's important to be clear on what this tool is and what it isn't. So this is an assessment that we can use in preschool. It is available to any preschool student. So any student, preschool age 4-year-olds, can use this assessment. So it is a tool specifically designed to show preschool learning in English language arts and mathematics. Think of it as a summative assessment. So it gives us a benchmark of that student's knowledge, particularly at that point in time. So it's really just looking at one point of time. What the PEEP is not is it's not an assessment of all skill areas. So it doesn't assess a child's development like social, emotional, or physical skills. So we're really looking more at those academic areas. It's also not a way to track growth from the beginning of the school year to the end of the school year yet. And it says there that it is in development. So we are working on revising our PEEP. So our current PEEP does not track growth. However, our revised PEEP, which will be coming very soon, will track growth. So we'll be able to look at a student's entry score and their exit score and be able to see the growth that the student has made throughout their school year. And most importantly, it is not a measure of a teacher's ability or skill. Again, it is just looking at what the student knows at that point and what they don't know, so we can give them the help that they need and fill those skill gaps. Next slide. Okay, and as Katrina mentioned earlier, when we move into kindergarten, we use Acadience to assess our students. So we have the PEEP, which we talked about on the last slide. That is what we use to assess our 4-year-olds in preschool. And then once they move into kindergarten, we use the Acadience assessment. So we use both the Acadience reading and the Acadience math assessment. These are sets of brief, powerful assessments, or what we would call screeners, that are used for early literacy and numeracy skills. Acadience is used in a few key ways. First, it is used as a universal screener. So it is given to students 3 times a year, at the beginning of year, the middle of year, and the end of year. That's what those acronyms BOY, MOY, and EOY stand for. And it is used to identify those students who may be at risk, either with reading or with math. It is also used for progress monitoring. So it helps us determine if the interventions that we are giving to students are actually working. And if they're not working, it gives us a timely way to adjust those interventions that we are giving to students and change it then, instead of waiting and wasting some extra really important time. And then third, it provides data for MTSS, which is multi-tiered systems of support, or RTI, which is response to intervention. It's the data that teams use to help make critical instructional decisions for their students. So like I was saying, noticing that students have holes and gaps, finding out what areas we need to work on with students, and then making those timely changes and changing their instruction as soon as possible, so that way we can give students the help and support that they really need. Next slide. So we're just going to take a closer look at each measure, each of these assessments, the Acadience reading and the Acadience math. So Acadience reading assesses the foundational skills that are critical for learning to read. These include key areas like phonemic awareness, and I really want to pause and highlight phonemic awareness here. This is the ability to hear and manipulate sounds in spoken words. So it is purely an auditory skill. There are no written materials that students are looking at. They are not looking at any text. A lot of times when we talk about reading, we instantly think about that text on words, but we have some pre-reading skills that are really crucial for students to know in order to be successful with reading. And one of those is phonemic awareness. So phonemic awareness is one of the biggest predictors of future reading success. And honestly, it's an area that sometimes we don't give the attention that it really deserves. So ensuring students are strong in this area before they're deep into phonics really is such an absolute game changer. So as you are looking at the instruction and the reading activities, the pre-reading activities that you are planning with your preschool age students, just keep that in the back of your mind of how important phonemic awareness really truly is. Along with that, with the Acadians reading, it also assesses the alphabetic principle and phonics, which is understanding letter sound relationships. It assesses fluency and comprehension, which is reading accurately and understanding the text. Acadians reading, like we mentioned, it does start in kindergarten and it goes through the end of sixth grade. And these skills that it assesses change across grade levels to remain age appropriate. What Katrina was hitting on earlier, where we really want our standards and our assessments to be age appropriate. We're not expecting students to do things that are way advanced for them. We want these things to be age appropriate. We want them to be relevant to where the student is currently at. And then similarly, we have Acadians Math, which measures foundational math and numeracy skills. So this covers early numeracy skills, which is basic number sense, computation, which is fluency with math facts, and then problem solving, which is applying those math concepts in order to be able to solve more complex math tasks. Next slide. So on this slide, we have the assessment crosswalk, and this is really where it all comes together. So like Katrina said, this is available as a resource to you. It's also here in our slide deck. So Katrina and I put this together, and just like with the standards and how there is an alignment amongst the standards, we wanted to show how our assessments align with each other, both the PEEP assessment and the Acadians, and how they align to the standards that we have. So it maps the skills from the PEEP exit assessment in preschool directly to the kindergarten Acadians reading measures. So for example, there you can see that the PEEP questions about first sounds, which is question number 5 on the PEEP, aligns directly with the Acadians measure of first sound fluency and the phonological awareness standards in both pre-K and kindergarten. So it really shows us that the PEEP assessment is a valid predictor and it prepares students for the skills that they are going to be assessed on in kindergarten. And again, remember when you are giving the PEEP assessment, it is just it's like a snapshot in time. It is where the student is at that moment when they were assessed. Okay,
Yeah,
so
I like to use, and that's why we have this illustration at the bottom. I like to use the comparison of apples and oranges. PEEP is apples, kindergarten is, or the Acadians is oranges. So, and the common phrase is, well, you can't compare apples and oranges. Well, yeah, you're right, but you can compare fruit. So even though I know the PEEP is not a one-to-one match to Acadians, I still know that there's going to be some kind of a skin. There's going to be some
mhm,
kind of a flesh on it. There's going to be seeds. So I
mhm.
can look at the data from PEEP where that's that first sound fluency, and I can't say like a score of 5 on PEEP equals a score of 5 in Acadians, but I can say a score of 5 is on benchmark for PEEP. So they should be scoring at benchmark for Acadians. And if they're not, that gives me, the teacher, some more information about what is going on with this child's development. How can
Mhm.
I better support them? And even more informative than that, say on that PEEP exit, they didn't meet benchmark. And then on the kindergarten Acadience beginning of year, they didn't meet benchmark. Well, now I've got 2 data points that are going to tell me this child actually needs more support with beginning sounds and phonological awareness.
Yes, definitely. And I like to use it as a predictor, right? Just like what Katrina was saying, it's not going to tell us exactly how the student is going to score on the next assessment that they take, but it gives us a prediction of how they're going to do. Like Katrina, if they're getting at benchmark on the PEEP, we should be able to predict that they are getting at benchmark on the next assessment on the Acadians. And if they're not, why? And vice versa, if they're not getting at benchmark on the PEEP, we're predicting that they're probably not going to be on benchmark on Acadience as well. So let's look at the PEEP and see those areas that they were struggling in and help give some interventions and help boost that student up so we can get them to at benchmark both on the PEEP and the Acadience.
One of my favorite stories to tell about this is one year teaching kindergarten. I just had this class of children who were very nervous about leaving the classroom. So we
Oh.
left the classroom to go do our beginning of year benchmark assessment. And half of the children in the class were just bawling the entire time.
Oh.
So our beginning of year scores for 12 of my students were all zeros. But thankfully, I was just one door down from the preschool teacher that several of these students had had. So instead of looking at these zeros and being like, well, my kids know nothing, I just walked down the hall and I'm like, hey, Miss Tracy, can you tell me what these kids actually know so that I'm not reteaching stuff that they know? And then, yeah, by the middle of the year, when we went to do that test again, they were all confident, everything was fine. And I tell you, I looked like the world's most amazing teacher that year, though, because we went from zeros to at benchmark. But yeah, I just think like you're saying, Dallas, it's just a snapshot. That
Mhm.
snapshot that year told me those kids were terrified to leave the classroom. Didn't really tell me a lot about their abilities with language, but I can pick that up from their preschool.
Yes, I love too how that highlights the importance of vertical alignment amongst teachers, right? Of talking to the teacher in the grade level before you, of like, hey, what do these students know? What can I help them with? And jump into it right off the bat, right?
Ah,
Going along with progress monitoring, when students start kindergarten, there are lots of progress monitoring supports and resources that are associated with the Acadience assessment. And so we really heavily recommend that you are using the Acadience progress monitoring tools starting in kindergarten. And Katrina is going to go over some progress monitoring ideas and tools for in preschool.
yeah. I put this little screen grab of the booklet for what it looks like on an Acadience progress monitoring, because for some of us, this is very familiar. But in my preschool upbringing, when I was a preschool teacher, this was very foreign to me. This is not something that I saw on a day-to-day basis. Um, and so the first time I was introduced to this in the kindergarten space, I was like, oh, this is so helpful. So the way this kindergarten one is laid out is, and it's kind of small, but down here at the bottom, you write like the month, and then each week you're giving the same assessment 4 times, and you're seeing how their score is doing week to week. And then you can do the next month, week to week. So you're tracking, but you're only tracking one skill. The most you would want to progress monitor is 2 skills. If you're progress monitoring more than 2 skills, I'm exhausted for you. Like, take that down a
And so
notch.
are the students. They're
Yes,
exhausted too.
yes. So like this would be a great way to monitor, like, is the child producing a rhyme? When I say a rhyme, can they say a couple rhymes back to me? Or can they identify 2 words that rhyme and one that doesn't? And then this is so you can graph it and you can see the graph if that's helpful. Great. For me, it was really helpful to see it on a graph. For others, I know it's not as much. But that's what it looks like for Acadians. Now, in our preschool world, it's a little bit of a roll of the dice to find a good progress monitoring tool. There are a lot of comprehensive or summative assessment tools available, but not a lot that are just like quick, small snapshots. So I've listed here, it's also in your handout, some of the assessment tools that I came across. One that was developed by this Hastings and Prince Edward District School Board is available to you on UEN, and it's called the QPass. It does say that the tool is intended for kindergarten. And actually this one down here, the past, also says that it's for kindergarten. However, there are skills in it that are preschool age phonological awareness. So you can use it. You just want to keep in mind, like, whatever benchmark they have for like passing is going to be a kindergarten benchmark. So you're not going to expect your preschoolers to be scoring that high. You'll want to scale back a little bit. But it is a great way to use this same tool week after week and see if your students can make progress on that skill. Really Great Reading has some great assessment surveys, is what they call them. And I'm pretty sure I pulled this one from Really Great Reading. So you can see they've got here, and they all come with instructions. So like, you, the teacher, say this, and then the student replies that way. What I like about a tool like this from Really Great Reading is you've got 1 week here, and then when you turn the page, the assessment is the same, but the words are different. So you know the child is actually doing the skill and not just memorizing cupcake is cupcake. So you do want to vary the words, but you want to make sure the skill is being measured the same way. This screenshot down here is actually from the Peli, which is the precursor to the Acadience. This one is an assessment you have to purchase, but I wanted to just point out that if you have the ability to purchase an assessment tool, Acadience does have a preschool, it's only English language arts, but it is a preschool English language arts assessment that has progress monitoring that aligns with your Acadience. So that is out there. The past is great because it's just phonological awareness, and you're screening for, can kids manipulate those sounds? If they hear a sound and then I like alter the sound, can they recognize which one is altered? This is a good one. And then there are a lot of tools available from Reading Rockets is the website. You can go in and see like, which one am I thinking is going to be the best one to meet the needs of my students. But I tried to pull phonemic awareness or phonological awareness tools specifically because that is a harder skill for us to remember that students need to be building a skill in, because it's just so intuitive. We're all wired to hear and speak, and we forget, or I forget sometimes just how critical that is to later knowing how to read. So if you walk away with nothing else tonight, walk away knowing that the more you talk and then give your students an opportunity to talk back, you are building a better, stronger foundation for them to be able to read later. And rhyme like crazy. If you're known as Dr. Seuss and your kids are like, why are you always rhyming? You're doing the right thing. So those are some progress monitoring. If I were in a classroom and I were thinking, I really want to progress monitor my students, how am I going to set that up? Well, I'm going to pick a day and a time that it's comfortable and easy for me to sit down with a student and get a good idea. I'm not going to pull them out of the block center and make them come over and do sit down rhyming words with me, because they're going to be real mad at me because they want to be in blocks. I'm going to find a time that makes the most sense to get a good accurate measure. I'm going to pick one skill and I'm going to measure that skill every single week at around that same time, so, as close as you can, and just jot it down. And then after 6 weeks, I'm going to look back at my progress. Is that student learning? If they've made progress, great. Then what I'm doing in the classroom is working. If I notice they haven't really made progress, or they've only made a little bit, but I'm still not comfortable with how much progress they've made, well, I'm going to take that information and reflect on my teaching. How can I actually teach to this child this particular skill to help them be able to increase more in this area? And that's why we want to say you want to keep it to one, maybe two skills. Because if you're doing that much focus, you can't focus on all the things. Focus really is about just one thing.
Yeah. narrow it down to what the student needs first, get that gap filled, and then once that's filled, move on to the next skill that students need. But instead of spreading yourself thin and doing multiple skills at once, just focus really heavily on that one skill. Once the student has that, then you can move on to the next skill.
Absolutely. All right.
Okay, so we have talked about our standards, we have talked about assessment data. So what is the next step? Well, the next step is actually really, really critical, and that is communicating this information with caregivers. So we do have the PEEP individual student parent report. So if you are using the PEEP with your preschool students, we have this report. It's really, really effective and valuable to be sharing with parents. So when you administer the PEEP, you are going to get an individual student report for each student. And there's just a little snapshot of that on the screen right now that you can see. It lists out the criteria that would put a student with support needed, and then the criteria that would put the student within that at benchmark zone. So the reason why we want to share this with caregivers is because it creates a shared understanding. So instead of just saying, oh, your child is doing so well, the report really shows caregivers specifically what their child knows in literacy and numeracy. And I think more importantly, it opens a two-way conversation. So it allows you to ask caregivers if this is what they are seeing at home too, and then compare what is happening at home versus what is happening at school. It also empowers caregivers to provide targeted support. We really want to create a partnership between caregivers and schools. So giving them this report allows you to give specific and low stress ideas for things that they can work on at home, which makes it feel more manageable for caregivers. And then, like I said, it creates that partnership. You are both the teacher and the caregiver are working on the same skills together to help the benefit of the child. And then third, it builds trust and prevents surprises. So you're being transparent. It makes caregivers feel included as partners in their child's education, and that they're not just being informed by it. They are included, they are partners, and we want them to know that the things that they're doing at home are valuable and important as well. So let's jump into looking at a student's literacy report. So on the report, you're going to have that snapshot of the last slide that lists out the criteria for being at benchmark, or if they have support needed, some of the things that they're doing on the assessment. You're going to get a literacy proficiency score for each student. So you can see that this student scored an 11 out of 31, which would place them in the support needed category. But the nice thing about the report is that it doesn't just give a score, it breaks it down by skill. So we can see on here that each of the questions that were asked to the student are listed out, and it tells if the student got it correct or incorrect. So on this score report, we can see that the student correctly identified the cookies in the oven and the book on the shelf, but they missed the child with blocks and ball under the table for vocabulary. We can also see on directionality that they missed both items. So this level of detail is what really allows for that specific helpful conversation with caregivers about what they can practice at home. So as looking at that directionality question where the student missed both of it, where should I begin reading? That's something that is so easy for a caregiver to sit down at night and say, we're going to read this book together. You show me where I should start reading. And either, great, that's where I'm going to start reading, or actually, I'm going to start reading right here. Can you point to that with me? We're going to start reading right here. And then again, the which way should I go question. That's again, something so easy for a caregiver to sit down at home and do with the child. So you can show them, these are the questions that your child got correct. These are the questions that your child needs some additional support on. And here are some really simple ideas and ways that you can help them at home that I am also going to be doing in the classroom. So again, we're creating that partnership. We're both working on this skill together at home and at school. On our next slide, we have some numeracy examples. So all of this, again, is on that printed report that you can share with caregivers. It first shows a literacy proficiency, and then it shows the numeracy proficiency. And these are laid out really similar to one another. So you can see that this student received a score of 15 out of 32. That would also put the student in the support needed for the numeracy measures. So again, looking at these questions that are asked to the student, you can tell the parent that this student did a really great job on identifying the square. So again, you're bringing in those positives of the things that the student can do, and then saying our next step would be to work on recognizing circles and triangles. So your student already has that really, really great skill. They can identify the square. Now we want to extend that and start pushing the student on identifying circles and triangles. And then again, how can they support this at home? Well, easy. While you're driving down the road, oh, see that sign? What shape is that sign? Good job. What a great way. Or I'm going to start cooking dinner and we're going to pull ingredients out of the fridge. This is a box of chicken broth. What shape is this? It's a rectangle. You're right. Good job. So really giving those low stress ideas for ways that parents can help at home and create that shared trust and partnership. You can also use the criteria that is listed under the at benchmark category to help caregivers identify specific areas and concrete examples of how they can help their child at home outside of school.
Yeah, I am kicking myself just a little bit right now that I didn't include this in the resources, but I will, and it'll be in the email that goes out after this. We have a whole strategies and activities document that is actually housed by UEN. So
Mhm.
after you get this report, you could pull up the strategies and activities for shape discrimination, and it will give you on the left-hand column the standard, and on the right-hand column ideas like Dallas was just saying, short, brief, really quick, simple things that can be done at home with zero materials. That's the goal, is like you don't have to go to the store and buy stuff, zero materials to help support and strengthen this skill. So then if I'm in a parent teacher conference, I
Mhm.
could pull out that section and give a copy of that to a parent. If I'm talking with a child's after school provider. And I'm saying, hey, this child, we're working really hard on counting to 20. Here are some things you could do after school today while you're waiting for mom and dad to pick up and be able to build that bridge. I know in my experience, I've had a lot of grandparents be like, well, I have the kids usually on Saturdays for a couple hours. What can I be doing on Saturdays? And I'm like, oh, strategies and activities. Here, you do all of these.
Mhm.
And it's a really universal um, way to just share some ideas. And they are translated into Spanish.
Yes, and I've said it a lot. The goal here is that we're trying to create that trusted relationship amongst caregivers and parents. We're all in this together. We're all trying to support children and give them what they need, but we don't want to overwhelm caregivers. We don't want to make their lives any harder than they already are. So giving those really easy, low prep, low stress ideas of how they can help their child at home. So I love, Katrina, that you're going to add that into our resources. That is fabulous.
Hey, I love ending when I talk about assessments on Dory here and tell me a word that rhymes with pig, ends with eyeball. One invitation I'd like to leave with you that it's not really professional development, but it always brings me joy is after you've done a test, like just sit down and write down the things that kids have said, and then you have it for later and you can go back and read it. It's some of my favorite reading content is things that kids have said to me during testing.
Mhm.
Fabulous. But yeah, this QR code will take you to our OneDrive um, webinar resources. And then I'm going to pull up our huge list of questions.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to change the view really quick to make sure. Oh, good. we're on gallery. Hooray. All right, we only have 2 questions so far. However, that doesn't mean that we have to stop right here and question time is over. Please, as we are wrapping up, we would like to know how we can help make the information that was presented useful for you. So if you have any question from the very simple to all the way up to, I don't know, something complex, Dallas will take the complex ones and I'll answer the simple ones. It'll be great. So one of our questions was, where do we get these resource files? You saw the QR code at the end, but if you're like me, you either missed it or you're going to forget where it is later. It will go out in an email. We have something called a Padlet for the conference that has all of the resources from the entire conference in it. But there's also in our current meeting, down at the bottom, your bottom menu, you can see where there was a Q&A, and then right next to Q&A is a resources tab. And that resources tab also has a link to that same OneDrive folder. And in the OneDrive folder, there's the printable PDFs. There is a PDF that has all of the links from the presentation on it. And then I also made you a folder of just the vertical alignment documents from the standards for preschools 3 and 4. So we don't have a vertical alignment document for the standards, for all of the standards for grades other than preschool, but our preschool gift to you is the preschool 3 and 4 has a vertical alignment document, and I pulled those out so you can just print those if you would like. All right, Dallas, can anyone have access to the PEEP?
So the good news is yes, anyone can. So anyone can use the PEEP. We really want it to be used for our younger students who are aged 4 years old. So anyone who is working with 4-year-old students can access the PEEP. It is a downloadable PDF that can be accessed on the USBE assessments page. And then if you send an email to me, Dallas Brooks, which my email is listed in the resources provided, like what Katrina was saying. If you send an email to me, then I will walk you through the whole process on how to get onto the platform, where you can put your data. I will also walk you through some resources on how to be trained on the PEEP assessment. That way you know that you are administering it correctly and the way that it is intended to be used. But yes, everyone can use it. So we really encourage and want anyone aged 4 to be using the PEEP. And it looked like we had another question in the chat from Christy that said, to clarify, the alignment is only age 3 to 4, not pre-K to kinder. So the alignment on the resources that we have available for you, we actually do have it aligned on the resources on the crosswalk that Katrina mentioned. The PEEP assessment is intended for 4-year-old students. Let me know if that didn't clarify.
And I think as I was saying it out loud, I'm like, oh, I've muddled things a bit. So Dallas and I have created an alignment pre-K3 all the way through 2nd grade for ELA and math. And those are a PDF that is, it's in that OneDrive folder, and it says PK to 2 printable alignment document. Those are ones that we have created, just us. They haven't gone through like official document from USBE kind of process. And it's just because we've like copied and pasted and put it on a spreadsheet for your convenience. The vertical alignment document that I was referring to that has a folder inside the folder, it's like nested in there, and it'll say like ELS vertical alignment. The preschool standards, pre-K3 and pre-K4, when they were officially put out by USBE and they have the official, they've been voted on, and this is the official resource, part of that standard document was creating a vertical alignment for every single standard. And that is an official publication from USBE. And so it's those pages that are just pre-K3, pre-K4 for every single standard. Those are in the in that folder I mentioned. And if that's still confusing, you can just pretend I never said that, because it's really not important. It's just convenience. If you're like me and you're like, man, I wish I could just pull just the vertical alignment for social studies, that's why it's helpful. Okay. And then I'm seeing some people say that the OneDrive folder says it's empty. That's not bringing me joy. So let me pull up the OneDrive right now and see if I can find out why. And while I'm doing that, if you all have other questions, feel free to drop those in.
Yes, please let us know if you have any questions. Also, like I said, when we can get those resources updated for you, both Katrina and my email are listed in there. And so if questions arise later on, you are always welcome to reach out to either one of us. We are both happy to help.
Okay, I have a new link for y'all to everybody. Okay, so that should take you to a folder that has stuff in it. And then yes, we will email this all out again. We'll verify that it works so that you'll have access to it. And I think, Brittany, to show the QR code again, let me see if I can. Sometimes it says I can like make a visual and then I could just share my screen. So let me try that. Nope. Oh my goodness, the folder says it's still empty. Well, this is fun.
That's interesting. When I click on the link, it is there. So I'm not entirely sure why. But I think keep this link. So keep it pulled up, save it somewhere, and then we can go, and if those folders are empty, we can go add resources to those folders, but keep the link available. And then later on, refresh your page. We'll get those resources added, hopefully, into there. Yes, fingers crossed.
Sure. That's interesting. It does say on mine that the folders are pending approval status. So I'm going to ask our IT if I have to like click something to approve it for all y'all. Oh well. Well, that wasn't useful, but I hope that Peep and Acadian's information was useful.
I did also notice in the chat, this wasn't in the Q&A, but in the chat, Maria said that she notices that language is a barrier when doing the assessment. Maria, you are absolutely right. Unfortunately, in the assessment world, we do have to keep assessment standard. And so when we are giving directions and instructions, they have to be given the exact same way to students. We do have a revised PEEP coming soon. We mentioned that in the recording of the webinar. The revised PEEP allows to show for more growth measures from when a student is entering preschool until when they have graduated preschool and are going to enter kindergarten the next year. So hopefully with that revision and showing the growth level of students, that will help to modify some of those difficulties that come when students speak a different first language other than English.
Yeah, we have had questions about like, can't we translate it? Can't we allow it to be given in a student's primary home language? And there's two sides to this, and it's kind of an ongoing debate. The one side is, yeah, maybe they could be more successful if like even just the directions were given in a language that was familiar to them. But on the other side of that is the assessment is trying to measure how the student is understanding the instruction that was given. And so the classroom instruction, if the classroom instruction happens in English and you are assessing the child in another language, you're not able to understand if they are successful in that skill because of what they learned in class. If I were to go to school tomorrow in Norway, and I spent 6 weeks in a classroom in Norway and then took a test at the end, I would probably fail that test, even if it was like second grade level, because I'm not fluent in Norwegian and there are no cognates. So the test isn't going to assess my content knowledge necessarily, but it is going to assess and tell the teacher, I am not successful in this class. And I need something to be able to be successful. So if you, the educator, are sitting down with a child and you're testing in English and you're thinking, man, if I just asked this question in Spanish, the kid would get it. That is a good thing to note for yourself, like put a little post-it note, but you still need to give that assessment in the language that you give the instruction so that the assessment is measuring how successful that child is in the classroom environment.
Yes, and assessment is all about finding where we can help support the student in the classroom during classroom time instruction. So using those things that you know about the student, you know that they can do things in English in a different language. So how can we bridge that gap in order for them to be able to be successful on the assessment item, and using that information to bridge those holes and help the student to get to where they need to be, kind of like that ladder example that was shown earlier in the webinar. Okay.
Thank you so much, by the way, for that question. That was, that's an important one, I think, for us all to stop, talk about for a minute, especially when we get into this assessment category, and sometimes it can feel personal, where it's like, why are you attacking me, the teacher, when these students could be doing better? They just need a chance to learn the language. And so it's also a good opportunity to stop and be like, this is not an evaluation of you and your value as a human, nor is it an evaluation of the child and their value or their experience learning. It's just one picture of what they know to let you know, like, this is what they know, and here's where you can go next.
And Sandra, I see your comment in the chat. Again, looking forward to that revised PEEP that is coming out soon. We really have some exciting updates and changes to it, making things more in an observational based setting. And so hopefully with the revised PEEP that will be used next school year, hopefully it helps to mitigate some of those concerns with your students.
All right, that's noon. We're done.
Yes. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it.